No one in that marble-lined federal courtroom in Lower Manhattan could have predicted how the storm would break today. For nearly 2 weeks, the Daniel Patrick Moynihan Courthouse had been the epicenter of a legal battle that gripped the nation. The drama outside police barriers, satellite trucks, the perpetual roar of city life felt like mere background noise compared to what was brewing inside. Inside, all phones and cameras had long since been surrendered. The judge presided with iron discipline. Every seat in the gallery was filled by accredited journalists, veteran crime reporters, legal aides, close family members, and a scattering of celebrities connected to the names in the headlines. This was no open court for the curious. Every presence in the room had a stake, a purpose, or a job to do. For days, testimony had ranged from stories of brutal violence and psychological abuse to the infamous parties those freak-off nights whispered about in the industry and now spoken aloud on the record. There had been long hours dissecting Cassie Ventura's lawsuit. Others focused on the machinery of power and manipulation that kept victims silent. Each session brought a parade of witnesses, lawyers trading fire. The press hunched over legal pads as every lurid detail echoed off marble walls. But today the courtroom felt different. The air itself seemed to change when the next witness was called Terrence Howard, the acclaimed actor, a new name added to the already volatile mix. Unlike the witnesses before him, today's testimony would focus on something darker than celebrity excess or abusive relationships. Today, the charges looming over Diddy were about something even the tabloids could barely whisper: the disappearance of a child, a potential trafficking victim. For months, one name had lingered beneath the surface of the case: Ava Baron Combs. Only now did the prosecution move her to the center of the story. Who was this young girl, introduced to the world in the middle of a pandemic as Diddy's adopted daughter, only to vanish from all sight? Some believe she was Ava Grace Baldwin, a missing Texas child whose case had grown cold years earlier. If so, the implications were explosive not just for Diddy, but for the entire web of enablers and power brokers whose fortunes hung in the balance. As Terrence Howard stepped up, the tension in the room sharpened. The press scribbled furiously. Lawyers exchanged glances. The judge watched with a wary eye. Howard looked straight ahead, preparing to shoulder the weight of what he was about to say. You could sense it in the air. Today, everything changed. This was no longer just about abuse or excess, but about the fate of a missing child and the possibility of crimes that would bring federal RICO statutes and decades in prison. Before Terrence spoke, one question loomed. Where is Ava Baron Combs? And who is truly responsible for her disappearance? As you listen, take a moment. What city, what state are you watching from? And who knows, maybe you have seen Ava in your own neighborhood without even realizing it. If you think you have ever met or spotted someone who could be Ava, do not hesitate to contact your nearest police department immediately. Every tip could matter. Do you believe Ava is a victim, or is Diddy just a casualty of the court of public opinion? Comment Ava or Diddy and tell us your perspective. A quick reminder, this video is for education and discussion with details drawn from public testimony, reporters' notebooks, and official filings. Some information has not yet been independently confirmed. Please watch with discernment. As Terrence Howard raised his hand for the oath, a new chapter of the trial and of this entire saga began. The courtroom seemed even quieter as Terrence Howard stepped up to the witness stand. He paused for a long moment, scanning the room not out of arrogance, but the kind of caution that only comes from living too long under the shadow of power. Every pair of eyes watched him. Even the lawyers, so used to conflict, seemed to hold their breath. Terrence did not rush. He laid his hands on the polished rail, straightened his back, and took a breath that was almost a sigh. The judge nodded gently, and the clerk asked for his name. He spoke it softly, voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. Terrence Dashin Howard. Some people in the courtroom knew him as an actor, a man used to the spotlight. But today there was no spotlight, just the relentless glare of justice and the weight of what he was about to share. Terrence looked out across the faces, reporters scribbling notes, lawyers sharpening their pens, and the family members of both sides. Some glaring, some simply exhausted by the weeks of testimony. For a moment, he seemed to search for the right words, as if rehearsing them in his mind. Then he began. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, I did not come here today for fame or to chase headlines. I wish I could have stayed silent. I wish I could say that this is someone else's fight, but that is not true. I am here because of the things I have seen, and the burdens I cannot carry alone. His voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with a kind of righteous anger that only grows when secrets become too heavy. There are moments in a man's life when silence becomes complicity. For months, I tried to convince myself that what I knew could be left behind, that it was not my responsibility. But every night I lay awake, thinking of the faces, especially one, a young girl whose presence haunted every corner of my memory. He did not name her, not yet. Instead, Terrence let the silence speak for a moment. Even the judge seemed to lean forward. I have worked in this industry long enough to know that power protects itself. People get hurt, stories get buried, And if you stand up to the wrong man, you can lose everything: your job, your reputation, even your safety. I do not say this lightly. It would be easier to keep my mouth shut and let someone else face the risk. But if I do, then what does that make me? He looked down at his hands, as if searching for an answer written in the lines of his palm. I am not here to play hero or to settle old scores. I am here because I am a father myself, because I have seen what happens when children are left to fend for themselves in a world that does not care who chews them up. Terrence paused, his jaw clenched. I do not know if my words will change anything. Maybe all I will do is bring trouble on myself. But I would rather live with trouble than with shame. There comes a point when the truth is bigger than the fear. He looked at the judge, then at the jury, and finally at the spectators, their faces a tapestry of disbelief, hope, and doubt. I owe it to myself and to the children who cannot speak for themselves to tell what I know. That is why I am here today. That is why I will not be silent, no matter what it costs me. With those words, the silence in the courtroom became almost tangible, as if everyone sensed the storm gathering just beyond the doors. And somewhere in the distance, the memory of a young girl lingered, her fate now woven into the fabric of justice. The afternoon Terrence described felt frozen in time. It was the spring of 2020, at the height of the pandemic, when the world seemed to hang on every new headline and social media post. On that particular day, millions tuned in as Sean Diddy Combs went live on Instagram, the blue light of his phone casting shadows across the faces gathered in his lavish living room. But what most people remember is not the decor or the celebrity cameos. It is the introduction of a young white girl who, in a matter-of-fact voice, announced herself as Ava Barron Combs. The camera lingered on her for an extra beat. She sat between Diddy's sons, her posture stiff, hands twisting nervously in her lap. Diddy, always the master of ceremonies, leaned in with a broad smile and said, "Tell everyone your name, Ava. Tell them your story." The girl glanced sideways, eyes searching the faces around her, strangers to the world, perhaps strangers to her as well. Then, almost as if reading from a script, she repeated, "My name is Ava. I am a Scorpio. My last name is Combs. My other last name is Barron." The mood in the room felt oddly rehearsed, like an audition nobody wanted to be in. Diddy continued, "Tell them how I adopted you." There was an uncomfortable pause. Ava's voice dropped even lower. "I was on the streets and Papa Combs decided he wanted to be a caring man, so he picked me up and told me to come inside and play with his kids." The words hung in the air, oddly clinical for a child's memory of rescue. Diddy nodded, beaming, as if to reassure the world and himself that this was a story of compassion. Terrence, sitting at home that day, could not shake the sense that something was amiss. He had seen his share of publicity stunts and well-meaning gestures gone awry in Hollywood, but this felt different. As an outsider looking in, he noticed the tension in Ava's body, the way her eyes darted to Diddy's sons for approval, and how none of Diddy's daughters seemed to be anywhere nearby. Why, Terrence wondered, did this supposed moment of family unity feel more like a staged scene? Social media exploded. Some viewers praised Diddy for his generosity and boldness, lauding the heartwarming adoption story as a bright spot in a dark year. But others, especially those with sharper eyes for detail, voiced their doubts. Threads appeared overnight, dissecting the live stream frame by frame. They noticed how Ava rarely smiled, how she answered every question as if coached, how she was positioned physically closer to the sons rather than the daughters. Was it simply the awkwardness of a child on camera, or something deeper? As days passed, Terrence found himself replaying the live stream in his mind. The world moved on quickly. There were new scandals, new distractions, but he could not let go of that image. A girl surrounded by strangers, her story delivered in monotone, her eyes never quite meeting the camera. It did not look like family, Terrence would later say in court. It looked like theater. Beneath the surface, the seeds of doubt had been sown. Terrence began to keep an informal record, screenshots, online comments, even his own written notes tracing every odd detail he could remember about that day. He was not alone. The internet's self-styled detectives kept digging, searching for clues in public posts and old interviews. The more they found, the more the cracks in the happy narrative began to show. As Terrence recounted this Instagram moment in court, the jury leaned forward, each person quietly reconsidering what they thought they knew. He concluded this part of his testimony with a question, one he first asked himself 4 years ago and still could not answer. If this was a story about saving a lost child, why did it feel like she was more lost than ever? A hush fell over the courtroom as Terrence Howard leaned forward, his expression shifting from measured witness to relentless investigator. The judge, sensing the gravity of what was coming, motioned for silence. The attorneys set down their pens. Even Diddy, who until now had worn the mask of confidence, seemed to shrink slightly in his seat. There was an unspoken electricity. Everyone in the room could sense that this was not another story of wild parties or celebrity excess. This was about something far more elemental, the fate of a child. Terrence began slowly, voice steady but heavy. "I spent months haunted by that live stream," he told the court. But it was not until late one night, scrolling through a missing persons database out of pure restlessness, that I stumbled onto a photograph that made my heart stop. The name was Ava Grace Baldwin, missing from San Antonio, Texas. Last seen in 2015 when she was just 6 years old. But the eyes, the mouth, the shape of her face, every detail echoed what I saw on Diddy's Instagram Live. I could not shake the resemblance. It was like looking at the same child, aged 5 years, placed in a different world. The prosecutor quickly displayed side-by-side images on the evidence monitor. One, the widely circulated missing poster of Ava Grace Baldwin. The other, a screenshot from Diddy's live stream. Gasps escaped from the assembled journalists and legal teams as the similarities became obvious. Same long forehead, rounded jaw, the uncertain half-smile. Even from across the room, it was clear that these two girls could be one and the same. Terrence described the process that followed. I started compiling everything I could: public records, school attendance data, social media posts, the dates when each girl appeared or disappeared from view. The more I searched, the more the puzzle pieces locked together. Ava Baldwin vanished from her elementary school in Texas at age 6. For years, there was nothing but silence until, suddenly, a new Ava appears at the side of a music mogul in New York. The timeline fits. The physical growth fits. Even their body language, both shy, withdrawn, always on the edge of the frame, matched perfectly. He spoke of contacting a private investigator, even reaching out to a missing persons nonprofit, hoping for fresh leads or a genetic match. At times, he confessed, he felt like he was chasing shadows, pursuing a wild theory no one wanted to believe. But every detail, every photo, every snippet of video made the truth harder to ignore. It was not just the resemblance, but the way the adults in both worlds moved to obscure the facts. The records for Ava Barron Combs were always incomplete. No adoption documents, no school records, no medical history tied to her before the pandemic. For a moment, the courtroom held its collective breath. Then Terrence delivered his conclusion, his voice trembling with conviction. I am not a detective. I am not a cop. But as a father, and as a man who has seen too many secrets buried in this business, I am certain. Ava Barron Combs and Ava Grace Baldwin are the same child. I believe, with every instinct I have, that the missing girl from Texas was hidden in plain sight, paraded before the cameras only to disappear again when the spotlight faded. The impact of his words rippled through the chamber. One of the jurors exchanged a glance with the court reporter. The judge leaned back, expression grave, drumming his fingers on the bench. Diddy's legal team conferred in urgent whispers, while Diddy himself pressed his lips together, as if refusing to let even a single reaction slip. Terrence finished his testimony by addressing the gallery and the millions likely to follow the story. I know this is a heavy claim, maybe it sounds too far-fetched, but I ask you, how many coincidences does it take before we start calling it a pattern? If this girl is truly still missing and we have seen her right in front of us, do we not owe it to her to demand the full truth? He paused, letting the question settle, and then posed a challenge. If you were in my place, if you saw what I saw, would you really believe these are two different children? Or would you fight to connect the dots no matter who tried to stop you? The courtroom, for the first time that day, was completely silent. Once the echoes of Diddy's Instagram Live faded, so too did all traces of Ava Barron Combs. At first, the public assumed the young girl would become a regular presence, a new member of the famous family, perhaps featured at parties or holidays. Yet after that brief, awkward live stream, Ava vanished from the spotlight almost as quickly as she had appeared. There were no more photos of her at family events, no playful TikToks, no candid birthday videos. She was missing from every frame. Attentive fans and social media sleuths noticed the strange silence. Where other children in Diddy's orbit were showcased often, Ava seemed to slip into a void. Internet detectives pored over every available video and photo, comparing dates and details, but found nothing. On rare occasions when she appeared, she was always on the fringes, never laughing or at ease. Her gaze turned away from the camera. Soon, even those brief glimpses stopped entirely. Reporters reached out for comment, but Diddy and his family offered no explanations. Instead, there was a chilling quiet. Publicists brushed off questions. Social media managers deleted comments and ignored direct messages. The family's digital footprint seemed carefully curated, as if someone was scrubbing away any reference to Ava. When pressed, sources close to the music mogul claimed she was simply not part of the public side of the family, but gave no further details. This silence only fed the growing unease. On forums and in private groups, people wondered aloud, had Ava gone back to Texas? Was she truly safe? Some pointed to rumors about custody battles or hinted at legal complications. Others recalled the haunted look in Ava's eyes during that live debut, and questioned whether she had ever really belonged in the first place. More than one amateur investigator suggested a deliberate effort to erase her presence. By the end of that first year, Ava Barron Combs had become a ghost in the celebrity world, a girl whose story had briefly intersected with the rich and powerful, then vanished without a trace. No one could say for certain where she was, who cared for her, or why her time in the spotlight was so fleeting. The questions lingered, heavier with every passing week. And so, as the courtroom listened to Terrence Howard's testimony, that void remained unanswered, echoing with the fear that sometimes when a child vanishes from the camera, it is not because they are safe. It is because someone wants them hidden. If you were in the shoes of Ava's loved ones, how would you react to such a disappearance? Do you believe her silence means safety or something much more troubling? The hush in the courtroom thickened as the next witness was called. A man who had for decades stood only steps behind the most powerful figures in hip-hop. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, cut an imposing figure as he took the stand. His suit, slightly rumpled, could not hide the aura of someone who had seen too much and kept even more locked behind guarded eyes. As he settled in, the air seemed to tighten. Pens stopped moving, and all eyes fixed on the man who knew Diddy's world from the inside. Gene's voice was rough, steady, carrying the weight of years spent in shadows. I was there for almost every major moment. I saw things most people would never believe. He paused, his gaze flickering toward Diddy, who sat stone-faced, lips pressed in a thin, tense line. When it comes to Ava Baron Combs, I need to be clear what happened was never about family. It was about the cameras. A hush fell, Gene went on, his tone growing harder. Ava was paraded in front of the world for show, not love. She was brought in when the timing was right, when the world needed to see a different side of the man in that chair. His finger pointed, not accusing, but certain. I saw how she was used, then made to disappear when she had served her purpose. That is not what a father does. Somewhere in the rows behind the defense, a reporter's hand trembled as she jotted notes. Diddy's lawyer jumped to his feet, voice sharp. Objection. Speculation. The witness is editorializing. The judge raised a hand for silence, reminding everyone that Gene was giving testimony based on his unique access. Gene merely nodded, calm, but the lines on his face deepened. When you work for men like that, Gene continued, you learn to see the patterns. I saw children treated like tokens, faces for the camera, but ghosts behind closed doors. Ava was not the only one. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the jury. I am telling you, there were things happening that nobody wanted to see. Not just with Diddy, but with others. When someone gets too powerful, they think they can rewrite the rules. They forget that children are not props. For a moment, Gene's voice broke almost too soft to hear. I tried to speak up once, years ago. I was warned. I was told to keep quiet or risk everything. He paused, steadying himself. But when I saw Ava, when I saw the way she looked, how quickly she was erased, I knew I could not carry that secret any longer. The tension in the courtroom was now electric. Diddy, jaw clenched, glared at Gene. The judge watched intently, occasionally jotting notes. Several jurors exchanged glances, faces tight with disbelief and anger. No one moved. It was as if the entire room was holding its breath. Gene finished quietly. I do not care who you are if you hurt a child. If you treat them like currency, the truth always finds you. That is why I am here. Because somewhere out there, Ava deserves justice, and so do all the others. As Gene stepped down, the air in the room felt heavier. The sense of danger, of secrets on the edge of being revealed, lingered with every heartbeat. If you saw something truly wrong, if you knew a child was at risk, would you have the courage to speak up, no matter the cost? While the courtroom drama unfolded, the city's headlines and social media feeds churned with a name that never seemed to fade. 50 Cent. He was not in the gallery, not on the witness list, but his presence hung over the trial like a specter. For years, Curtis Jackson, known to the world as 50 Cent, had waged a very public war against Diddy, dropping taunts, cryptic warnings, and, lately, what he called receipts. As testimony about Ava Baron Combs rattled the halls of justice, 50 Cent's voice grew louder online. He reposted old live streams, circulated images of Ava, and most notably teased the arrival of his documentary, Did He Do It? Each new clip sent shockwaves through the industry, not just because of what might be exposed, but because it signaled that the days of silent complicity could be over. In one viral post, 50 Cent wrote, "They cannot charge him for what we saw, but we cannot unsee it." The meaning was unmistakable. He claimed to hold video evidence footage the authorities had yet to make public, the kind of evidence that could tear down entire empires if it ever left the vault. The fear that settled over Diddy's inner circle was palpable. Rumors flew about USB drives, encrypted files, and a network of insiders now considering which side of history they wanted to stand on. It was not just about revenge. To some, 50 Cent looked like an avenger, a self-appointed whistleblower who refused to let secrets die in the dark. "If you have the truth," he said in a radio interview, "you owe it to every victim who never got to speak." Yet his motives were endlessly debated. Was he out to protect the vulnerable or just destroy a rival? As one commentator put it, sometimes justice arrives on the back of a grudge. Across the courtroom, the mention of 50 Cent's documentary drew anxious looks. Diddy's attorneys whispered among themselves. Journalists scribbled furiously, speculating about the bombshells that could still drop. Every reference to 50 Cent seemed to rattle the room's foundation. A reminder that this case was not confined to the courthouse. It was being fought on Instagram, YouTube, and cable news. In the corridors of power, silence had become a liability. Outside, the world waited. Did he do it? Trended on social media, every teaser trailer dissected for hidden clues. Even those skeptical of 50 Cent's motives admitted one thing. The story was now too big to be buried. There was no going back. What about you? Do you believe 50 Cent is truly seeking justice for Ava and others, or is he just chasing revenge in headlines? Would you trust a documentary to reveal the truth, or is it all just another piece of the power game? Terrence Howard's return to the witness stand brought a different energy, something darker, more complex, and brutally honest. After hours of legal arguments and damning testimony, the courtroom seemed to sense a shift. The previous sessions had exposed parties, abuse, and celebrity excess, but Terrence was here to pull back another curtain. The machinery of power and the dangerous games played with innocent lives. He looked out at the assembly of lawyers, family members, and journalists' faces trained to hide their reactions, but unable to mask a certain tension in the air. Terrence began, his voice steady yet tinged with a pain that was impossible to fake. I spent decades believing that celebrity adoptions were a beautiful thing. Who would question a star offering a child a second chance at life? But over time, I saw a pattern, a system built on public adoration, but often rotten beneath the surface. He described how in Hollywood, yes men flock to the rich and famous. Their job is to shield, enable, and spin every decision. With enough power, reality itself is rewritten. I have seen children adopted not because someone wanted to build a family, Terrence said, but because they needed a headline, or a shield from scandal, or a way to soften an image after too many bad stories. The room fell into a heavy silence. That is where the real danger starts. Because a child is not a prop, but in this world, props are disposable. He paused, then continued with an example that drew audible gasps, a reference to Madonna, and the string of controversies that trailed her adoptions. Look at what happened when celebrities used adoption as PR. The accusations, the investigations, the children whisked away from their homes and cultures. And who is left to pick up the pieces when the cameras go off? Terrence's gaze sharpened, his words slicing through the courtroom's composure. The world looks away. Sometimes those kids are left with nothing. Sometimes they become targets. Sometimes they disappear altogether. He did not say Ava's name right away, but everyone felt her shadow haunting the testimony. You ask me what I fear most? Terrence pressed, his voice gaining force. It is not that a child might be forgotten or left to fend for herself. No, what terrifies me is the idea that a child, after all the headlines and the fame, could be trafficked, abused, and hidden away by the same power that claimed to save her. That is the nightmare I live with. That is what keeps me up at night. A murmur swept through the court as Terrence's words landed. Even the judge looked unsettled, pen hovering over her notes. The cycle repeats, Terrence said quietly. The world is full of yes men and silent accomplices. But every now and then, the truth claws its way to the surface. And when it does, we must decide, will we look away, or will we finally hold the powerful accountable? As he stepped back from the microphone, Terrence left a final, chilling thought in the air. We talk about abandoned children, but I am more afraid of those who vanish into the darkness, never to be found, never to be saved. Ask yourselves, if Ava really disappeared, who is responsible, and how many more children have been lost to these games? The questions hung there, heavy as iron, and the court prepared itself for the storm still to come. A heavy silence pressed against the courtroom as Terrence Howard steadied himself at the witness stand. The air felt charged like the moments before a thunderstorm, every person holding their breath, sensing the weight of what was coming. Terrence glanced down at his trembling hands, then up at the boy Tamduan. His voice, when it came, was measured but searing. I have held my tongue long enough. Today I need to say something that has haunted me every night since the day Ava disappeared, he began, locking eyes with each juror in turn. I am not just a celebrity. Not just an actor, not just someone who knows Diddy. I am a father, and I am here because I know what it is to lose sleep over the fate of a child. Terrence paused, letting the words settle. I do not believe Ava simply vanished, nor do I believe she ran away, or that this was some unfortunate misunderstanding. In my heart, and from everything I have seen and learned in this business, I am convinced Ava became a victim of trafficking. Maybe even something worse. I know that is a terrible accusation. But I would not sit here risking everything if I did not believe it with every part of me. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Even the most seasoned court reporters looked up from their notes. The boy Tamduan sat motionless, their eyes fixed on Terrence as if the very walls leaned closer to hear his next words. He described in careful detail the signs he had witnessed. The abrupt disappearance, the erasure of Ava from family life, the way her name was never mentioned again in the Combs household, the chilling absence of even a single photo, post, or memory. "This is not how loving families operate," Terrence said, his voice raw. "This is how people hide things. This is what happens when there are secrets so dark nobody dares to even speak their names." A hush fell over the crowd as Terrence recounted whispers he had heard from industry insiders, people who were too frightened to testify, but who had reached out to him in the shadows. There are stories of children who were brought in, put on display, and then disappeared when they were no longer useful. Some say Ava is still out there. Some say she is being hidden, moved from place to place, forced to do things that no child should ever have to endure. Others fear it is already too late. As his words echoed, Diddy shot up from his seat, anger boiling over. "This is outrageous," he bellowed, voice cracking with rage. "I have not seen or spoken to Ava in years. You cannot pin every evil on me. I am not responsible for what you imagine." His lawyers scrambled to their feet, shouting objections, demanding that Terrence's statements be stricken from the record. But Terrence did not back down. He turned, faced Diddy, and met his glare with steely resolve. "You can deny all you want, but the truth finds its way out. If law enforcement does not step in, if someone does not protect these children, then people like Ava end up suffering in silence. She could be anywhere now under someone else's control, trapped, hurting, maybe worse. That is what terrifies me, and that is what should terrify all of us." The judge rapped her gavel repeatedly, restoring order as the gallery buzzed with nervous energy. In the commotion, a voice from the back called out someone who claimed to have seen a girl matching Ava's description at a shelter in another state. It was not confirmed, but the mention sent a ripple through the room, a sliver of hope tangled with dread. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens nearly tearing through the paper. Some in the audience wiped away tears. Others stared at Diddy with disbelief or with fear, as if they had just seen the mask of celebrity shatter to reveal something monstrous underneath. Terrence turned again to the boy Tamdwan, his voice softer now, but unwavering. "Ask yourselves, what is the cost of silence? How many children have to vanish before we say enough? You cannot bring Ava back with doubt, or with fear, or with power. Only with the truth. Only by refusing to let another child disappear." He drew a deep breath, letting the silence stretch. If you are watching this, if you have seen a girl like Ava, do not look away. Do not tell yourself it is not your problem. Because one missing child is not just a tragedy for her family, it is a failure for all of us. The tension was thick enough to touch. Security shifted uneasily. Diddy sat back down, his face ashen, lips pressed into a thin line. His lawyers whispered frantically, planning their next move, but the damage was done. The accusation now hung over the courtroom, impossible to ignore or erase. As Terrence's testimony ended, the courtroom remained suspended between hope and horror. The boy Tamdwan, the judge, the world outside, everyone was left with the same chilling question. Where is Ava, and will the truth ever be found? The courtroom was thick with tension as the next phase of the trial began. After Terrence Howard's stunning allegations, the prosecution called a federal agent to the stand, someone from Homeland Security's Digital Crimes Division. The agent's presence alone sent a ripple through the gallery. He spoke with the clipped, deliberate tone of someone trained to say only what needed to be said. He confirmed that, in the course of their broader investigation into Sean Combs, a number of digital devices had been seized from the defendant's homes and offices. Laptops, smartphones, hard drives, dozens of items now sat in evidence rooms in Miami and New York. The agent did not reveal specifics, only that the review was ongoing and complex. There are thousands of hours of footage, millions of messages and files. Our teams are combing through every detail to determine whether any evidence relates to missing persons, especially minors, he stated, his words echoing in the hushed air. The defense objected to the agent's testimony, calling it speculative, but the judge overruled, noting the relevance to the ongoing case. The boy Tamdwan listened closely, some scribbling notes, others simply watching the agent with narrowed eyes. In the gallery, a nervous energy grew. Everyone wondered what, if anything, had been found. The prosecution's attorney pressed gently, asking whether any evidence had yet linked Ava Barron Combs, or any other minor, directly to criminal activity. The agent paused, then said, "I am not at liberty to discuss specifics in open court, but I can confirm that our focus includes any material that could provide clarity about the whereabouts of missing persons referenced in this case." A silence settled over the room. It was as if every breath, every shuffling footstep, was waiting for some definitive answer, a missing file, a face, a clue that would break the case wide open. But no such clarity arrived, only the agent's measured promise that no stone would be left unturned. As the federal agent stepped down, the judge reminded both sides of the gravity of the moment. The court takes allegations of trafficking and harm against minors with utmost seriousness. We await further developments from law enforcement. At counsel tables, lawyers from both sides shuffled their notes, the defense tense, the prosecution watchful. Diddy stared ahead, jaw tight, the lines in his face deepening as the weight of the investigation pressed in on all sides. In that silent, watchful courtroom, the fate of one missing girl and the unraveling legacy of a music mogul seemed to hang by a thread. No one said what everyone was thinking, that whatever secrets remained, the truth was coming, slowly, methodically, and with a force that even power and money might not stop. The courtroom had grown impossibly still. After the final witness stepped down and the federal agent's words faded into silence, every person present seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the scales of justice to tip one way or the other. The judge gazed over the hushed assembly, her eyes betraying a gravity that no words could soften. She reminded the room that justice was not a moment, but a process, a long, winding journey where every fact must be weighed and every testimony examined with care. "This court," she intoned, "will continue to follow every thread of evidence until the truth is fully revealed. Let no one doubt the seriousness with which these allegations are regarded." Her gavel struck quietly, a sound more chilling than thunder. At the defense table, Diddy sat rigid, hands folded, eyes fixed on a spot far beyond the walls of the courthouse. His lawyers whispered among themselves, trading glances that mingled worry with defiance. Across the aisle, Terrence Howard looked almost spent. His hands clasped tightly, his shoulders tense, a man who had finally spoken the truth he had carried too long. Reporters scribbled in their notepads, but for once, the frenzy had faded. Even they seemed daunted by the enormity of what was left unsaid. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with questions no one dared voice aloud. Where is Ava? Will anyone be held accountable? Is this the day the powerful finally face consequences? For those who had followed every moment of this trial, memories of previous hearings lingered, especially the testimony of Kid Cudi, who recounted the bombing of his Porsche. Two stories, different victims, but the same web of fear, silence, and power. If both threads unraveled all the way, RICO charges against Diddy would become inevitable. But the judge offered no certainty, no pronouncement of guilt or innocence, no declaration that Ava had been found. Instead, the courtroom was left suspended in a state of possibility, a future where truth might yet emerge, but only if those with knowledge or courage stepped forward. As the gavel echoed one last time, the judge's final words hovered in the air. Justice may be slow, but it does not disappear. In this court, every life matters, even the ones most at risk of being forgotten. If you have followed this story, ask yourself, do you believe justice will prevail? Do you think Ava is safe now or still lost in the shadows? Share your thoughts below, and remember, in the world of the powerful, a missing child is never just a headline. It is a wake-up call for us all.